My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. What a powerful statement. Tomorrow will mark the 16th anniversary of the attack on America, the greatest attack on America since Pearl Harbor. This year, America is reeling from the effects of Hurricane Harvey in Texas and hunkering down right now, this very moment in Florida, trying to endure the fury of Hurricane Irma. It's during times like these that we as Americans and we as Christians must take a fearless moral inventory. Is God trying to get our attention? And more importantly, does he have it? Now, I'm not saying that we're under direct judgment, but we do know this. When the attacks happened at 9/11, there wasn't a catastrophic bustling about in heaven saying, hey, I never got the memo. How did this happen? God knew it was going to happen. God knew it was going to happen and when it was going to happen and who was going to be there and why and everything that we're going to go through. And he knew the hairs of the head of every person that fell or didn't fall on 9/11. Amen? So we got to at least acknowledge that God was in control in 9/11. Hurricane Harvey came, and millions of folks were displaced in Texas. And when Hurricane Harvey was coming, God wasn't up in heaven wringing his hands saying, oh my goodness, that one got away from me. He knew exactly what was going on. He knew exactly what path it would take, and he knew exactly what houses it would take, and it was all by design. Here comes Irma. He knew that we would think it's going to go to the east, but he knew it was already planned for the west. He knew that little jog would cause some people to not make it out as quickly as they would like, or maybe not make it out at all. It was all by design. God has a plan. Now, what does that mean? That means that God, whatever is happening, is good, he's just, and he's right. So if you were to look at it and say, well, that's not fair, you don't have the equipment to look at a holy God and judge a holy God through your flawed eyes and say he's not right because God is right. But what we ought to do is take a step back and say, oh, is there something about our nation that is lacking? Is there something about us that is lacking? Is there something about the temperature of Christians in our culture that's lacking? So we are in the Old Testament, and we've been reading prophecy after prophecy, and perhaps it's all kind of blurring the lines of men. The one thing I got about the Old Testament is God's really upset at people. And you'd probably be that's a pretty accurate deal. But I think a little more accurate would be to say that we as human beings are not heads, and that's why God is so upset with us. But for sure, that's the case. But God had a message for Hosea. We continue our we continue to silence our phones before we, sorry about that, guys. Quiet. Okay. As we continue our journey through the Bible in our Bible reading challenge, we find ourselves in the minor prophets, and Hosea was one of many voices proclaiming God's case against the people of Israel. I want you to look at verse 1 for a second. It says, "Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land." That word controversy is, I have a case against you. It is interesting that that case against Israel could mirror the case against our nation too. Hosea's book was written between 715 and 710 BC, almost 100 years before young Daniel was carried into Babylon. In this book, we find God laying out his case against Israel. When we examine our nation and our lives as individuals, in the light of Hosea 4, we find that we too can come to the same conclusion. We are suffering from dangerous ignorance. Look at verse 6 again. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. What a damning and sad thing. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Now, God was not saying that the public education for the people of Israel is sad and we need to spend more money on teachers. People are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That's not what he's saying. He's not even saying that there is something bad going on in the water. You guys are getting too much lead in the water and your brain cells aren't working. He's not saying that. He's saying, because thou hast what? Rejected knowledge. There's a crisis, a lack of knowledge in the people of Israel because they said, nope, I don't want to learn it. Nope, I'm not going to listen to it. And then there was a vacuum of knowledge. Now in America, here's our problem. Not only our ignorance, but now follow me, because I don't mean this to sound like doublespeak, but it will. But our ignorance of our ignorance. Hear me. Let me say it again. The problem in America is not just our ignorance, but the ignorance of our ignorance. We don't even know what we don't know. And I'm about to show you where our lack is. If you could, and you know what? It was okay for a while. There were some evangelical preachers who said so and got in trouble. By the way, you can tell when an evangelical preacher is preaching right because generally he gets in trouble. Jerry Falwell had said, you know what? Perhaps we as Americans are given one more warning. And he was talking about 9/11. He was saying, we need to wake up. God can't hold back his wrath much longer. And of course, a bunch of people went crazy about that. But you know what? If you look biblically speaking, he can't be far from the truth here. Now we get cocky. Now we're 16 years from that and say, well, it hadn't happened since. I guess maybe God wasn't that upset. Well, I would say that perhaps you're not paying attention. Because I'll bet the people right now in Tampa that have chosen not to leave might be saying, wow, there's fire in the fury. Man, something's upset. Now listen, let me say this, and I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. Really I am. What if the pagans can say, Mother Earth is upset because we make plastic, and therefore she is punishing us with a hurricane? Can we not say that the God of creation that showed us what holiness is upset that we murder millions of babies every year, and maybe he's trying to get our attention? Can we not say that? Dangerous ignorance. Ignorant regarding the truth. Hear ye, hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. There is no truth in the land. Now that's powerful. There is no truth in the land. What are we talking about? Do you know that when it comes to absolute truth, many of us in America, and I would say worldwide, are kind of goofy? Think about this. If we come to technological truths, stuff about computers or electronics, some of you guys can crunch the numbers and you talk about how many volts and watts and this and that go here and there and do all these cool things that electronic stuff does. It's all very specific. If you need a 7/16 wrench, if there is such a thing, and you're off just a little bit, you're going to strip a bolt. You say, but it's close enough. Well, we know in our society, listen, truth matters, specific truth matters. Could you imagine if someone says, we need to put a bolt on here? What size bolt? Whatever feels good to you. Let's just put it this way. I would not want somebody with that concept of truth putting lug nuts on my car and then me driving it 70 miles an hour. What do you think? What's that strange noise? What's that? Where'd that tire come from? Yeah. Listen, when it comes to the things we see, it's self-evident. We say, oh, there are absolute standards, absolute truths. If I'm building a house, it's got to be this exact measurement on this wall and this exact measurement on the other wall. Could you imagine if we're using two different standards? Or no standard at all. We'll just kind of guess. We'd all end up lopsided. Whatever you feel is right, friend. Well, we'd say, well, we don't do that. But what about when it comes to spiritual things? We as Americans, and even sometimes we as Christians say, well, that's not up to me to say. Well, what's right or what's wrong? Well, that's not up to me to say. That's just whatever you feel. Do that which is right in your own eyes. Turn your will and your way over to God as you understand Him. Man, you just may not understand God right, and you can turn your will and your way over to, the TV is your higher power, and that doesn't make you enlightened, that makes you foolish. Our first problem is that we are ignorant that there is even such a thing as the concept of absolute truth when it comes to spiritual things. People say, well, how could you say that it's only Jesus? Because he's the only one that died on the cross. Yeah, but there's so many people that have other ideas. Yeah, and there's so many people that are wrong. Listen, if you want to call my phone, you have to get all the digits right. You call my house, and in your mind, you intend to call my house. And so you put it in there. My home number is 860-482-3133. If instead you go 860-489-3133, guess what? You get the YMCA. And there are folks, I can tell you, over the years, that have intended to get the YMCA at 6:30 in the morning. That did not get the YMCA. Now, they had almost all the digits right. Shouldn't that be enough? They got the one digit wrong and ended up with me or my wife at 6:30 in the morning. Truth is absolute. Someone say, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with believing in a God that would send people to hell. Since when does that matter? I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the concept of gravity. It's very restricting. And it makes me drop stuff all the time. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. But just because I'm uncomfortable with a constant, a law, something bigger than me, doesn't mean that all of a sudden I say, well, I don't like it, so therefore, since I don't believe it, it doesn't exist. That would just make me goofy. My people are ignorant. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. They don't even know that truth is consistent, that truth is absolute. And what's worse than that is truth has been repressed for a long time. The Bible says neither is there salvation in any other, there's none other name given among men whereby we must be saved. We are dangerously ignorant of common decency. Once you reject the concept of absolute truth, then you will find basic things about getting along with one another goes out the window. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood toucheth blood. God is now talking about the way mankind treats one another. As we continue to turn from the truth, we turn on each other as a predatory Lord of the Flies kind of matter. This is where we take 15 seconds of a Facebook video, determine all of the truth that 15 seconds tells us, out of context, mob the street and say, I don't like what's going on. I am very upset with injustice. Let me find some random person's car and set it on fire. What's happening? Why are we doing this? Why? Now listen. It may make you feel better to say, well, people are being violent because we have a bad president. But you know what? That's an ignorant statement. Because people have been violent with Republicans as presidents and Democrats as presidents. People are becoming crazy and mistreating one another because of our aggressive, intentional ignorance of the truth. Listen, Jesus said it this way. How do you summarize the law? Love God, love each other. Easy enough. This list, swearing. Now this swearing here isn't just using curse words. This is bringing a curse upon somebody, calling upon either God or entities to curse somebody and bring them under a curse. So I would say that if I am showing enough disdain to say, like toward Nick, I don't like you so much that I want God to put boils on your head from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, and I hope you rot in your skin. I think that may be mean and presumptuous and stirs the wrath of God. What would cause somebody to do that? The same people that would put a severed head of the president on the internet. Why? Because we have a dangerous lack of knowledge. Swearing, lying, killing, stealing, committing adultery. All of those things, mistreating one another, and they break out. Now, that word break out means that all of these sins fester and fester and fester and fester in like a wound in the nation, and then when they break out, it's like that wound pops and spreads the infection and the judgment and the justice all over. My people perish for a lack of knowledge. Knowledge of absolute truth. A knowledge of how to treat one another with common decency. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Ignorant regarding the person of God, because there's no truth, no mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. No knowledge of God. No experience of who God is. No experience of His holiness. No experiential knowledge of His love or justice. Now, how does that happen? Again, when we start talking about the spiritual health of the land, it's easy to say, well, I'll tell you how it happens. It's the liberal press. I'll tell you how it happens. It's those commie teachers that are rotting the minds of our children. I'll tell you how it happens. It's those libtards that are in charge. And I heard terms like that. You know, that's lazy thinking. Tell you how it happens. Turn with me, please, to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and verse 34. I'll tell you how it happens. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 34. The Apostle Paul is talking to believers. He says, awake to righteousness and sin not. He's talking to believers. Awake to righteousness and sin not, for some have not the knowledge of God. I speak this to their shame. That's not what it says, is it? I speak this to your shame. Listen, if we could say and we could look and we could think about the spiritual health of our nation and we could say, yeah, maybe God is trying to get our attention as a nation, oh, it's easy to shift the blame. Well, it's all those comfortable folks down south there. Every time the California gets shaken with another earthquake, yeah, it's all those fruits and nuts out there in California. God's just going to drop them off and drown them. Yeah, well, good for them. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Something bad happens in Washington. We say, oh, well, there's a bunch of politicians in Washington. Of course God's going to get that. Hey, listen. My people perish for lack of knowledge. New Testament, I speak this to your shame. The fact that we can go in our nation and people be ignorant of basic Bible truths, that means we as believers are not doing what we're supposed to do. The fact that we can go in Torrington and you can go somewhere and say, I'm from Evangelical Baptist Church, and they say, where's that? That's a problem. To say, any basic Bible truth and they're ignorant of it, that's a problem. Why? Because we're not doing what we're supposed to do. Listen, every believer, if you're still breathing air, we're supposed to be getting the word out. Let your light so shine among men. If everywhere you look, say, yes, but our nation is so dark. That's because there's an absence of light. But I'll tell you, it's not because there's an absence of Christians. Hear me again. If our nation is in darkness, darkness is the absence of light, but it is not because there's an absence of Christians. If you come away from this message today thinking Pastor Carpenter is preaching against the sins of Florida and Texas and New York City, you've missed it. I'm saying that all of us need to wake up, for both as a nation and individuals. It may be we too are suffering from dangerous ignorance. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Now, whose fault is that? Every head bowed, every eye closed, nobody's looking around.